thoughts on, are there certain messages that work well with certain stakeholder groups in terms of tailoring, that resonate with one group of people more than, of course, we're generalizing here too, but so if you have ideas about that, stick that in the chat. What messages are good, particularly for certain stakeholders?
And I see someone, I'm sorry, I'm trying to read and still be present, but some of you guys are giving me some really great comments. I think it's Jean, if I'm sorry for pronouncing your name wrong, but parents are decision makers. I think that's important when we're talking about school community. Who are your change agents? So who are those decision makers? Who are those change agents? Because like we said, we might go into school communities where that arts is not affordable. So when you're trying to bring something in, it's something new. And sometimes we know anything new is met with resistance. So it's also important not only to talk to all those people that we spoke to, but who are those change agents? Who are the ones who really know those students, who really know the school community, that can make impactful changes where it's something that is enjoyable for everyone. And I know when we were talking about this, one thing I did share with Jonathan, I was like, we want to be very careful as advocates that we don't go in already assuming that we know what's best for a school community that we have no presence in, previously. So I think that's what we find a lot. And we see that in education. I saw someone say data. Well, yeah, we have these outsiders coming in trying to run education, which I feel like is an art, as a corporation. And so we see that's why it doesn't work. That's why we're like, that doesn't even make sense. If you talk to teachers, they'll say, no, we don't want to just teach to the test. But they're not having these conversations with the stakeholders, and that's why it's important. So we don't want, even though sometimes we have great intentions of helping, but then we don't sit here and speak to the stakeholders in that school community, and we just assume we know better. And so you end up doing more damage than you do good. And that's so, like, good intentions, yeah, that's great, but we want to make sure that we have good results. And so, go ahead.
I was going to say small businesses were brought up too, and I think that's a great point about how to, convince them, because they're so interested in the vitality of their neighborhood. So keep those comments coming, people. We're going to say we have the capability to save this chat as well. So your comments will continue to help.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes left, so I know there's been a lot of really good comments in the chat. I'm gonna just keep it moving though.
I love, and Juliana, yes, listen to their needs first and explain exactly. One thing I will say, I've seen a principal do where we are bringing arts education to that school. She had the students pick what we did it for recess. So I was in the Inglewood school community where the actual area was a little bit violent. So they didn't want the students going outside. So they did indoor recess, but let's be real. What indoor recess looks like when you've been cooped in the classroom all the time and you don't get to go outside. Children need to move and run and experience the elements. So what she did, because she knew that they had to do indoor recess, to kind of speak to Juliana, she allowed the students to take a survey. So they were able to pick what arts class they wanted to take, whether it's dance, tumbling, acting, or music. And what happened was we got better results because now they're taking classes that interest them, just like we would do in high school or we do in college. I think sometimes the elementary students, we just kind of force this and think it's a one fit all, but obviously they have certain classes that they have to take. But in that element, we sat here and gave them surveys, and then afterwards, if they didn't really like it the second semester, they were also able to pick another arts related activity. Now we know that every school doesn't have that opportunity, but I do think surveys for students as well as teachers are good, because you get to see, like, what do our kids even like? What would they like to do? Opposed to, we're just going to give you something to do.
One of the questions too, I just threw into the chat is, when schools don't have arts education and we think through how to support those schools and in getting arts education, are there stakeholders that it's best to contact first? And Reese, you may have some thoughts on that. Interested in everyone's thoughts on that. Like what might be that first step, or what are some of those first outreach stakeholders, maybe even outside the school?
And I was about to suggest that sometimes through Title I, that's how I was able to serve a lot of the schools in our underserved communities, was they use Title I funds in order to bring on vendors like myself, arts vendors, we were able to do like after school programs and different things like that. So like how my principal would say, she was like, I can't afford the salary of a music teacher right now. So however, I can afford to pay, X amount of dollars for this contract to outsource and bring in a vendor to teach music. So there are different ways to do it. And like, that was one of the ways that my principal has done it. She was super savvy. So the Title I funds they are a possibility where you can then kind of use like after school programs. Sometimes you can do during school programs depending on, sometimes CPS has different guidelines, but there are ways where, we can still serve these students and not feel like, they're left behind.
And see, Jeff put in Americans for the Arts resource link in there in terms of research. So that's something that you can check out to kind of help make your case. And there's also, I think Rachel mentioned the arts liaisons, LSCs too. Don't forget about the LSCs. I know those elections are coming up, and they can be another voice for arts education. And if you find important to find champions who can be on the LSC so that they can continue to bring this up.
Absolutely.
The next question, and we're throwing these questions at you because we're trying to get as much of your insights and knowledge as we can. You guys are the experts out there. We've talked about the why and the who, and if you have ideas about that, keep putting those in too. This is kind of getting at the how. What is the best way in that outreach or in that convincing to advance arts education, particularly in areas that don't have it? Does it involve mostly direct meetings, or just do you reach out cold? Do you work through partners that you have there on the ground? I think we kind of mentioned that at the early beginning, but what are some good approaches? And if you have resources too, feel free to put those links in the chat.
I love what Richard said. He said for some students that have difficulty expressing themselves, art is a language. Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important. I mean, we have seen it, you look at different stats going around, like how instead of you have schools taking out detention and doing yoga. And they are seeing a tremendous change in the discipline in their school community. So Richard, great point. You're absolutely correct.
Mm-hmm. And the cool part, I think, with arts is they're really kind of 5 languages, which is great, dance and music. And so they can really interact with kids at where those students are at. So
Go ahead.
Oh,
I think you're
okay.
about
So where is the local school council in the decision-making process? And who are the influencers for the principals? It's another great question. And let's see. So again, let's group source that information. LSCs can be involved in different ways, and their activity can be at different levels depending on the school. But also another great question too, influencers for the principals. So send some of your thoughts in on that too.
Oh, 5 minutes.
Yeah, Julianne brought up keeping in touch with anyone who has expressed interest over the last few years. I also think that's a great point, because sometimes in advocacy, it's not about a one-off. And it's not about just contacting people when you need something from them. It's about ultimately building relationships. And so even if it's not possible 1 year, as you mentioned, Juliana, it's good to follow up, to keep that communication going, so that when there are opportunities that pop up, you already have that connection, which is great.
And then I saw someone say there's 0 principals. within this.
Let's get 'em in.
I think that was a point I think we brought up our very first panel where we were saying, honestly, I think, and I was, I work with very good principals, so I've been blessed to do that. But I think also support each other, because I think administrators are overwhelmed right now. Especially with this whole virtual learning, teachers are overwhelmed right now. Students are definitely overwhelmed. So it's a way that how can we divide up the workload, and how can we also feel supported so things don't go, needs don't go unmet. Like I know, like when I found a grant for arts education through the Illinois Art Council, if I'm not mistaken. And the thing was, my principal, I was like, my grant writer was like, just tell her we'll do it, and she'll have to look over it to approve it. Why? The principal was fine with it. She was like, yeah, I'll look over it, put in my 2 cents and then sign off on it. Why? Because they're overwhelmed. So they're like, I can't sit down and do an application, even though it's going to give money in order for my students to get arts education. So it's not a thing that they don't want it. Sometimes their plates are too filled. But how many arts vendors has that capability in order to sit here and then sometimes afford a grant writer in order for that to happen? So those are also, possibilities. But I think in this social climate, everyone is just overwhelmed. But we have to find ways where we can support one another, because at the end of the day, our students have needs that need to be met. Period.
And Jeff brought up, just looking at the last couple of comments, Jeff brought up about, good thing to take a look at there, about external vendors. And how can we make some of these things mandatory? TL mentioned that,
Right.
which is great. There's, CPS has its expectations. I think that's really important and is important to refer to. And without getting into it, some of you know about the state's Every Student Succeeds Act arts indicator, which can kind of help along those lines too.
Right. And to answer Jeff's question, yes, you're absolutely correct. They cannot take vendors cannot take the place of actual teachers. That's what I was saying. They can also we did like a recess. So it wasn't technically an actual contracted teacher. And we also did it after school. So it does depend on, you're absolutely right. No, they cannot take the place of a PE teacher legally.
And Laura mentioned SEL, and many of you have mentioned SEL as well. I think this is a real opportunity. The arts are so important academically. We know that part of a strong education academically, but much of the focus, and appropriately so, during this difficult time of transition has been on trauma-informed teaching, trauma-informed care, SEL, and this is our opportunity, I think, to really point to the truth that we've always known before, and even before the pandemic, that the arts are really powerful in helping students process difficult things and build the SEL skills. So I'm glad that that you brought that up.
I think it's time probably to wrap up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louisa. She go ahead. She did include the advocacy worksheet, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so everyone, a lot of this worksheet was, this presentation was kind of based off of this advocacy worksheet, and it includes a lot of the points. The structure is basically exactly the same, so take a look through that and add comments and ideas and questions. You all need to go back to the original Zoom. You can find the link to that in your email. Everyone has a different link, so I can't like drop a link. But go back to your email to go back to the other Zoom session. This was really great. Thank you all. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, everyone.
And Macy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We'll include some of those resources in the chat too, so you can have them.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day.
Bye. Good day. Enjoy the rest of the all partner meeting.